My own daughter wanted me to sell my soul to drug lords just so she could live like a queen, and when I refused, she decided to destroy the only thing I had left. I spent 40 years protecting my country, only to find myself hooded, bound, and thrown into a van like a common criminal. I thought I was being kidnapped by a cartel, but the truth was far more sinister. You will not believe who was pulling the strings until the very end. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you never miss a story. My name is Matthew Charlton. I am 68 years old, and for the better part of my life, I was the man standing between the safety of the American public and the darkness that tries to creep across our borders. I worked for the United States Customs Service for 4 decades. I started as a young man patrolling the docks in the stinging salt air, checking cargo manifests, and looking for things that didn't belong. By the time I retired, I had risen through the ranks, overseeing major logistical operations. I have seen it all. I have seen hollowed-out statues filled with narcotics. I have seen luxury cars with engines made of illegal alloys. I have seen desperation in the eyes of mules and cold, calculating greed in the eyes of traffickers. Through it all, I had a code. It was a simple code, one that I inherited from my father and one that I tried to instill in my own family. You do the right thing, even when no one is looking. Especially when no one is looking. In my line of work, the temptation was always there. There were whispers in warehouses, envelopes left on desks that were thicker than they should have been, and subtle nods from men in expensive suits who promised that looking the other way for just 10 minutes could pay off my mortgage. I never took a dime, not once. My reputation was ironclad. They called me the Wall down at the precinct, not because I was big, but because nothing got past me, and nothing could move me. But integrity, I learned the hard way, does not pay the bills in the way my daughter Elena wanted. Elena was my only child. My wife passed away when Elena was just a teenager, leaving me to raise a girl who was as beautiful as she was difficult. Elena had a hunger in her. It wasn't a hunger for food or love. It was a hunger for status. She grew up watching reality television shows about heiresses and influencers, and she couldn't understand why her father, a man with so much power at the border, drove a 10-year-old sedan and lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. The friction between us started small. She would complain about not having the latest designer clothes for school. She would roll her eyes when I talked about the pension plan. But the real break, the crack in the foundation that eventually brought the whole house down, happened when Elena was 26. She got sick. It started with fatigue and bruises that wouldn't heal. The diagnosis was aggressive but treatable if caught early. The problem was that the best treatment, the one with the highest success rate, was considered experimental and wasn't fully covered by my government insurance. We were looking at bills that would drown us. I remember the night clearly. Elena was sitting at the kitchen table, pale and trembling, looking at the financial breakdown the hospital had sent. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking not just with fear but with anger. "You know people. You know the people who move things." I looked up from my coffee, confused. "What are you talking about, Elena?" "I'm talking about the smugglers, Dad," she hissed. "The ones you brag about catching. You know who they are. You know that if you just let one shipment through, just one truck, they would pay you enough to cover this treatment 10 times over. I know how it works. I've heard you talk about the money they carry." I felt a coldness settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the winter air outside. "Elena," I said, keeping my voice calm, "are you asking me to take a bribe? Are you asking me to let poison into this country? I'm asking you to save my life," she screamed, slamming her hand on the table. "Who cares about the country? Who cares about the law? I am your daughter. If you loved me, you would do whatever it takes. You would take the money. Nobody would know. You're the Wall, right? If you let it through, no one questions it." I looked at her. really looked at her, and I saw a stranger. I saw a desperation that had twisted her morality into something unrecognizable. "I will save your life, Elena," I told her firmly. "But I will not destroy mine to do it. I will not become a criminal." She spat at me that night. She told me I was weak. She told me I was a fool who valued a badge over his own flesh and blood. But I kept my word. I did not take the bribe. Instead, I did what a father does. I sold the family cabin by the lake, the one place where I felt truly at peace. I emptied my 401k. I took out a second mortgage on the house. I went into massive debt, borrowing from credit unions and taking extra shifts until I was sleeping 3 hours a night. I paid for every cent of her treatment. It took a year of hell, a year of chemotherapy and radiation, but she recovered. The doctors said it was a miracle. Physically, she was healed. But spiritually, something had rotted. You would think that after I sacrificed my financial future to save her, she would be grateful. You would think she would look at her old father, who was now working double shifts with arthritic knees to pay off the loans, and say thank you. But Elena didn't see it that way. When she was finally healthy again, she didn't thank me. She looked around our house, which was now falling into disrepair because I couldn't afford maintenance, and she sneered. "We could have been rich," she said one evening while I was going through the stack of overdue bills. "You could have just taken the money from the cartels. We could be living in a mansion right now. Instead, look at us. We are poor. You made us poor on purpose because you're too proud." I couldn't believe my ears. "I saved your life, Elena," I whispered. "You did the bare minimum," she retorted, "and you made sure we suffered for it." That was the beginning of the end. I retired 2 years later, forced out by mandatory age limits and a body that was giving up on me. I was living on a fixed pension, most of which went to servicing the debt I incurred for her medical bills. Elena moved out, but she didn't go far. She stayed in town, working odd jobs, always complaining, always looking for a shortcut. She would come by the house not to visit, but to ask for money, and when I told her I didn't have any, the look in her eyes became terrifying. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I didn't know it then, but she had already begun her plan. She had decided that if I wasn't going to get rich illegally to support her, she was going to make me pay for my stupidity. She wanted revenge for the life of luxury she felt I had denied her. It started subtly. I noticed mail missing. I would get hang-up calls in the middle of the night. Then, strange cars started parking down the street from my house. Being an ex-customs officer, I have an instinct for surveillance. I knew I was being watched. I assumed it was paranoia, or perhaps some old enemy from the cartels checking to see if I was vulnerable now that I was retired. I checked my locks. I installed motion sensor lights. I stayed vigilant. But the enemy wasn't a cartel boss in Mexico. It was the girl I had bounced on my knee. Elena had begun writing letters. Anonymous letters at first, then sworn affidavits under pseudonyms. She sent them to the FBI, to the DEA, to Internal Affairs. She spun a web of lies so intricate it was breathtaking. She claimed that my clean record was a cover. She claimed that the reason I never caught certain major shipments was because I was the mastermind behind them. She told them that now, in my retirement, I was using my old contacts to smuggle high-value antique contraband, blood diamonds, stolen artifacts, illegal ivory, things that were harder to trace than drugs but incredibly valuable. She knew the system. She knew what keywords to use to trigger a federal investigation. And because she was my daughter, she knew my schedule. She knew when I went to the grocery store. She knew when I went to the park. And she knew exactly when to plant the evidence. The day it happened started like any other Tuesday. It was overcast, a gray, heavy sky pressing down on the suburbs. I had finished my coffee and decided to go out to the mailbox to see if the utility bill had arrived. I put on my slippers and my cardigan. I felt old that day. My joints were aching. I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my feet. I reached into the mailbox and pulled out a stack of flyers. As I turned back toward the house, I saw a black van screech around the corner. It wasn't driving normally. It was accelerating aggressively. My training kicked in, but my body was too slow. When I went outside, some people jumped on me and started tying my hands and putting a bag over my head. One of them shouted, "Now you can't escape from us!" They threw me into a van and drove me somewhere. I woke up in an empty room, and what those scoundrels did to me afterwards, I will never be able to forget. It was the hardest ordeal of my life. I was disoriented. The hood over my head smelled of burlap and stale sweat. My wrists were zip-tied so tightly behind my back that I lost feeling in my fingers almost immediately. The drive was bumpy and fast. I could hear men speaking in clipped, tactical codes. Target secured. Packages in custody. En route to the safe house. Safe house? This wasn't a police station. This wasn't a standard arrest. This felt like a rendition. Panic began to rise in my chest. Had the cartels finally come for me? Was this the end? When the van stopped, I was hauled out roughly. I stumbled, unable to see, and felt strong hands gripping my arms, dragging me across gravel, then concrete. I heard a heavy metal door slam shut. The air changed. It became cool and damp. I was pushed into a chair. The hood was ripped off my head. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the harsh glare of a single halogen bulb hanging from the ceiling. I was in a concrete room. No windows. A steel table bolted to the floor. A two-way mirror on the wall. Across from me sat two men. They weren't wearing cartel colors. They were wearing suits. Cheap suits, but suits nonetheless. They had badges on their belts, but they weren't displaying them. "Mr. Charlton," the one on the left said. He had a scar running through his eyebrow and eyes that looked like flint. "You have had a very long run, but the run is over." I gasped for air, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who are you?" I demanded, though my voice was raspy. "I am a retired federal officer. You can't treat me like this. This is assault." The man on the right leaned forward. He was younger, arrogant, chewing on a toothpick. "We know exactly who you are, Matthew. We know about the network. We know about the smuggling ring you've been running out of your basement for the last 5 years, and we know about the shipment you received this morning." "Shipment?" I shouted. "I went to get my mail. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb." The older man slammed his hand on the table. "We have the box. We found it in your garage, hidden behind the winter tires. Egyptian artifacts, Matthew. 4th Dynasty. Illegal to own, illegal to import, and worth about $3 million on the black market." My mouth fell open. My garage? I hadn't been in my garage in 3 days. "I park in the driveway." "I didn't put anything there," I stammered. "I have never smuggled anything in my life." "Check my record." "Your record is a lie," the younger agent sneered. "We have a source, a very reliable source, someone close to you, someone who watched you move the goods, someone who is terrified of you." "A source close to me?" My mind raced. I didn't have anyone close to me. I was a widower. I had no friends. I only had Elena. The realization hit me harder than the physical assault in the driveway. The blood drained from my face. "We have witness statements," the older agent continued, pacing around the room. "We have logs of your travel. And now we have the physical evidence found on your property. You are looking at 20 years for smuggling, another 10 for tax evasion, and God knows what else for the RICO statutes we're going to throw at you. You're going to die in a cage, old man, unless you start talking." I sat there, slumped in the metal chair, the cold seeping into my bones. It wasn't the fear of prison that paralyzed me. It was the heartbreak. Elena had done this. She had bought illegal artifacts, God knows how, probably with money she stole or borrowed, and planted them in my garage. She had framed her own father because I refused to be corrupt. She wanted me in prison. Why? Was it just revenge? Or was there something else? I looked up at the agents. I want a lawyer, I said quietly. The younger agent laughed. You're in a black site, Matthew. This is a Homeland Security holding facility for high-risk traffickers. You don't get a phone call until we process you, and we aren't done processing you. You're going to tell us who your buyers are. They kept me in that room for hours. They deprived me of water. They turned the temperature down until I was shivering uncontrollably. They played loud music to keep me from sleeping. It was psychological torture designed to break terrorists. And they were using it on a 68-year-old pensioner because my daughter had convinced them I was a criminal mastermind. But as I sat there shivering and terrified, my mind began to clear. I realized something. Elena was smart, but she was also arrogant. She had constructed a narrative based on movies and TV shows. She thought that planting evidence was enough. She didn't understand the intricacies of customs law or the specific paper trails that real smugglers leave. Paper trails that I knew how to read better than anyone. I wasn't just a victim. I was the wall. And if they wanted to investigate a smuggling operation, I was going to help them. I just had to survive the night. About 6 hours in, the door opened again. A different man walked in. He looked like a supervisor. He was holding a file folder. He looked at me, then at the agents. "Get him some water," the supervisor said. His voice was grim. "He's a suspect, sir," the younger agent argued. "I said get him water," the supervisor barked. Then he turned to me. "Mr. Charlton, we have a situation. We just ran a trace on the antique that was found in your garage." I looked him in the eye. "It's a fake, isn't it?" I asked. The supervisor paused. "No, it's real. But the purchase order wasn't linked to any of your known accounts. It was linked to a shell company registered 2 weeks ago, and the IP address used to register that company came from inside this building's guest Wi-Fi network log, but traced back to a mobile device." He leaned in close. "Mr. Charlton, who knew you were going to be arrested today? Because someone called the press 5 minutes ago and told them to be outside your house for the perp walk. It was her. She wanted the spectacle. She wanted me humiliated." "My daughter," I whispered. "Elena." The silence in the interrogation room was heavy, suffocating. The supervisor, a man named Agent Miller, stared at me with a look that was no longer accusatory but calculating. He was reevaluating the entire board. I sat there, my wrists still throbbing from the plastic ties, and I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was the calm of a man who has nothing left to lose. I had lost my savings, my home was crumbling, and now my reputation was under siege. But I had my mind, and I knew my daughter better than anyone else on earth. "Elena," Agent Miller repeated, testing the name on his tongue like it was a bitter poison. "You are telling me that your daughter, a civilian with no prior record, orchestrated a federal smuggling frame-up involving Class A artifacts? Do you know how insane that sounds, Mr. Charlton?" "It sounds insane because you are thinking like a law enforcement officer," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "You are looking for a motive that makes sense in the criminal world. Greed, territory, leverage. But you aren't dealing with a criminal mastermind. You are dealing with a narcissist who feels the world owes her a living." I leaned forward, the metal chair scraping against the concrete floor. "Look at the shipping manifest on that box you found. I bet you anything the customs declaration describes the contents as decorative ceramics, with a value of under $2,000. Am I right?" Miller exchanged a glance with the younger agent. He didn't say anything, which meant I was right. "That is the mistake of an amateur," I continued. "A professional smuggler knows that decorative ceramics from that specific region in Egypt is a red flag for customs and border protection. We flag those automatically for X-ray. If I were smuggling that, I would have labeled it as industrial machinery parts and coated the inside with lead paint to scatter the scanner. I would have routed it through Dubai, then London, then here. I wouldn't have had it shipped directly to my own garage. The person who did this wanted the package found. They wanted it to look like I was sloppy. But I am not sloppy. I am the wall. Miller slowly pulled out a chair and sat down. He opened the folder in front of him. We traced the purchase of the artifact. It was bought on the dark web, yes, but the Bitcoin wallet used to pay for it. It had a transaction history. It was funded from a bank account in the Cayman Islands. I shook my head. I don't have a Cayman account. Check my financials. I can barely pay my electric bill. We know, Miller said quietly. We audited you this morning. Your finances are a disaster, Matthew. You are drowning in debt, which is exactly why the prosecutor thought you turned to smuggling. It fits the profile. Desperate retiree needs quick cash. But then Miller tapped the paper. However, there is an anomaly. The Cayman account was opened 3 years ago. The initial deposit was small, but there were regular deposits made from a shell company that traces back to a generic LLC. We just got the subpoena results from the ISP 5 minutes ago. That LLC is registered to an address. He slid the paper across the table. I looked at the address. It wasn't my house. It was a rundown apartment complex on the east side of town. That is Elena's apartment, I whispered. The room seemed to spin. Elena had money? She had been crying poverty to me for years, begging for scraps while I worked myself into an early grave to pay off her medical bills. If she had an offshore account, that meant she had money she was hiding. Where did she get this? I asked, bewildered. We don't know yet, Miller said. But if she bought that artifact, she committed a federal crime. Trafficking in stolen cultural property carries a mandatory minimum sentence. If she planted it on you, that's conspiracy, perjury, and filing a false federal report. The younger agent, the one who had been so arrogant before, looked uncomfortable. Sir, if this is true, if the daughter set him up, we just snatched a decorated federal retiree off his front lawn based on a tip from the real perpetrator. The press is going to eat us alive. Miller held up a hand to silence him. He looked at me. Matthew, I need you to be very clear with me. If we pursue this, if we turn the microscope on your daughter, there is no going back. If she is guilty, she goes to federal prison. Not for a month, but for a decade. Are you prepared to do that? I closed my eyes. I saw Elena's face when she was a little girl holding my hand at the zoo. I saw her face in the hospital bed, pale and sick, begging me to save her. And then I saw her face the last time she visited, twisted with sneering contempt, because I wouldn't take a bribe. She had tried to put me in a cage. She had tried to take away my freedom, my honor, and my life, just to punish me for being honest. She made her choice, I said, opening my eyes. She wanted a criminal in the family. Now she has one. Do what you have to do. Miller nodded. Uncuff him. The younger agent cut the zip ties. The rush of blood back into my hands was painful, but it felt like victory. We are not releasing you yet, Miller said. We can't let her know we're on to her. If she thinks you're still in custody, she might make a move. We need to catch her in the act. We need a confession or undeniable proof that she planted that box. The plan they hatched was simple but dangerous. I was to remain in the holding facility for another 24 hours. They would leak a story to the press that I was being uncooperative and that the evidence against me was damning. They wanted to make Elena feel safe. They wanted her to gloat. They put me in a more comfortable cell, gave me a cot and some warm food. But I couldn't sleep. I paced the small room, my mind racing. I realized that the money in the Cayman account likely wasn't earned. Elena didn't have the skills to earn that kind of cash. She had probably stolen it or scammed it, or perhaps she had found the bribe money she always wanted me to take. Maybe she had made the deal with the devils I refused to touch. The next morning, Agent Miller came back. He looked tired. We have an update, he said. We monitored Elena's phone. After the news broke last night that you were being held without bail, she made a call. To who? To a real estate agent, Miller said grimly. She put your house on the market this morning, Matthew. She has a power of attorney document she claims you signed 3 years ago when she was sick. She's trying to liquidate your assets. She thinks you're never coming out. A cold fury took hold of me. That power of attorney was for medical decisions only, and it was supposed to be voided after her recovery. She had forged it or altered it. She wasn't just sending me to prison. She was selling the roof over my head while I sat in a cell. She is moving fast, I said. Too fast, Miller agreed. She's getting sloppy. She's meeting the realtor at your house in 2 hours to do a walkthrough. She wants to sell it as is for a quick cash offer. I stood up. Let me go there. We can't, Miller said. You're in custody. Make me a part of the operation, I insisted. Put a wire on me. Let me walk in there. If she sees me, she'll panic. She'll talk. You need a confession to make the charges stick, right? If I walk in there, she will tell me exactly what she did because she'll be too angry to control herself. She thinks she's smarter than me. Use that. Miller hesitated. It's against protocol. I am the wall, I said, drawing myself up to my full height. I have run more sting operations than you have filed reports. I can do this. Let me face her. Miller stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Get him a vest and a wire. We move in 30 minutes. The ride back to my house was surreal. I was in the back of an unmarked van wearing a Kevlar vest under my cardigan and a tiny microphone taped to my chest. The agents were listening in via an earpiece. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a terrible heavy sadness. I was going to war with my own blood. We pulled up 2 streets away. I got out and walked the rest of the way. The neighborhood was quiet. The overcast sky from yesterday had turned into a steady drizzle. I saw a luxury sedan parked in my driveway, the realtor's car, and behind it, a brand new convertible that I didn't recognize. Elena's new ride, no doubt bought with the money she expected to make from selling my life. I walked up the driveway. I could see them through the front window. Elena was standing in my living room, gesturing widely, looking like the lady of the manor. The realtor was nodding, taking notes. I didn't knock. I used my key. I opened the door and stepped inside. The air smelled of her cheap, overpowering perfume. And we want to list it immediately. Cash offers only, Elena was saying. My father is away. He won't be needing the property anymore. I wouldn't be so sure about that, I said, my voice booming in the small entryway. Elena spun around. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. She dropped the tablet she was holding. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. Dad? She whispered. Her eyes darted to the window, looking for police cars. You're arrested. I saw it on the news. There was a mix-up, I lied, stepping further into the room. The realtor looked between us, terrified. I think you should leave, I told the realtor. This is a family matter. The woman didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her bag and scurried out the door, sensing the violence in the air. When the door clicked shut, the silence was deafening. Elena stared at me, her shock quickly replacing with that familiar, twisted anger. How did you get out? She hissed. They found the box. I know they found it. So you admit there was a box? I asked calmly, moving closer to the fireplace. Don't play games with me, she screamed. You were supposed to be gone. You were supposed to rot in there. Why, Elena? I asked, letting the pain seep into my voice. I wanted the jury to hear this. I wanted the agents in the van to hear this. Why did you do it? I saved your life. I ruined my financial future to pay for your doctors. Why do you hate me this much? Because you're a loser, she shrieked, her face contorting. You had the power to make us kings. You worked at customs for 40 years. You could have been a millionaire. But you chose to be a peasant, and you forced me to be a peasant with you. She began to pace, manic energy radiating off her. You think you're so noble? You're just pathetic. So, yes, I bought the artifacts. It was easy. I found a seller. I used the money I made from skimming credit cards. Oh, don't look so shocked, Dad. I've been doing it for years. I bought the artifacts. I broke into your garage, and I planted them. And then I called the tip line. It was perfect. It was poetic justice. She laughed, a harsh, grating sound. I was going to sell this dump, take the money, and finally live the life I deserve. And you were going to die in prison thinking you failed. And you did fail, Dad. You failed me. She walked up to me, poking a finger into my chest. And guess what? Even if you're out on bail, the evidence is still there. You can't prove I did it. It's your word against the physical evidence. You're still going down. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized there was nothing left of my daughter in those eyes. Just greed and malice. I grabbed her wrist, stopping her finger from poking me again. You're wrong, Elena, I said softly. I'm not out on bail. Her eyes widened. What? I pulled my cardigan open, revealing the wire taped to my shirt. The small red light was blinking. I'm working, I said. Before she could scream, the front door burst open. Agent Miller and 4 other agents swarmed the room, weapons drawn. Federal agents! Get on the ground! Elena screamed, trying to pull away from me, but I held her fast. She clawed at my face, cursing me, spitting at me. You traitor, she howled as they forced her to the floor. I stepped back, watching as they handcuffed my only child. She was thrashing, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. She wasn't crying tears of regret. She was crying tears of rage because she had been caught. Agent Miller hauled her up. She looked at me, her hair wild, her eyes full of venom. I hate you, she screamed. I hope you die alone. Miller looked at me. He gave a sharp nod. We got it all, Matthew. Every word. They dragged her out of the house. I watched through the window as they shoved her into the back of a squad car. Not a black van, but a marked police cruiser. The flashing lights illuminated the rainy street in bursts of red and blue. I stood alone in my living room. It was over. I had cleared my name. I had proven my innocence. But as I looked around the empty, quiet house, I didn't feel like a winner. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. But the story doesn't end here. You see, Elena wasn't just working alone. When the FBI raided her apartment to seize her assets, they found something else. They found a journal. And in that journal, she detailed a plan that went far beyond just framing me. She had been corresponding with someone I knew, someone I had trusted for 30 years. And that betrayal, that was the one that nearly broke me. What did they find in the journal? And who was the second traitor waiting in the shadows? You will find out in the final part of this story. The interrogation room was quiet again, but this time the air felt different. It wasn't hostile. It was heavy with a mourning silence. Agent Miller placed a plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges. It was Elena's journal. You need to read the entry marked December 14th, Miller said softly. He didn't look at me. He looked at the wall, as if he couldn't bear to see the expression on my face when I read it. My hands were shaking as I opened the bag. I put on my reading glasses, the ones Elena had made fun of just hours before. I turned to the page. Elena's handwriting was jagged, angry, pressing hard into the paper. He promised me it would work, she wrote. Uncle Frank said the old man is too proud to ever suspect his friends. Frank said that if I plant the artifacts, he can pull strings at the agency to make sure the investigation hits hard and fast. He says once Dad is in prison, he can help me access the pension fund legally. Frank is the only one who understands. He knows Dad is a dinosaur. He says it's time for the new guard to take what's theirs. Uncle Frank. The book fell from my hands and hit the table with a dull thud. The room spun. Frank Dalloway. He wasn't my biological brother, but he might as well have been. We had gone through the academy together 40 years ago. We had patrolled the same docks. When my wife died, Frank was the one who handled the funeral arrangements because I was too broken to speak. When Elena was in the hospital, Frank was the one who sat in the waiting room with me, drinking bad coffee and telling me everything would be all right. Frank was the godfather to my daughter. He wasn't just a friend. He was the only family I had left besides Elena. And now, I was reading that he wasn't just complicit. He was the architect. Elena provided the hatred, but Frank provided the means. He was the one with the connections to the dark web. He was the one who knew how to source Egyptian artifacts. I looked up at Miller, my vision blurred by tears I refused to shed. "Frank?" I whispered. Frank is the head of the task force in the neighboring district. He's a decorated officer. He's also broke, Miller said grimly. We ran his financials after we found the journal. Frank has a gambling problem, Matthew. A bad one. He owes money to people you don't want to owe money to. He's been moving contraband through his district for 5 years to pay off his debts. He saw you as a loose end. You were retired, but you still had eyes. You were asking questions about shipping routes last month at the reunion, remember? I nodded slowly. I had asked him about some irregularities in the manifests, purely out of curiosity. I didn't realize I was spooking him. He thought you were on to him, Miller continued. So he weaponized your daughter. He figured if you were framed for smuggling, your credibility would be destroyed. No one would believe the wall if he was sitting in a federal cell. He used Elena's greed to cover his own tracks. I felt a coldness in my chest that was absolute. It was a coldness that froze the heartbreak and turned it into a sharp, jagged resolve. Elena was a lost cause, a victim of her own entitlement. But Frank? Frank was a traitor to the badge, to our friendship, and to the code we swore to uphold. I want him, I said. My voice sounded like grinding stones. We can't just arrest him based on the journal, Miller said. It's hearsay. We need him to implicate himself. We need him to admit he was the supplier. I know how to get him, I said. I stood up, feeling a surge of energy that defied my age. He thinks I'm still in custody, right? Miller nodded. We haven't released the news of Elena's arrest yet. As far as the public knows, you are still being held, and Elena is still in your house. No, I said. He won't talk to Elena. He's too smart. He'll talk to me. Release me. Give me my phone. I'm going to call him. What are you going to say? I'm going to tell him I'm out on bail. I'm going to tell him I'm broken, terrified, and that I need my best friend's help to hide the rest of the stash before the FBI finds it. Miller raised an eyebrow. You think he'll bite? He's greedy, I said. And he thinks I'm stupid. He'll come. 2 hours later, I was back in my house. The scene of Elena's arrest had been scrubbed clean. The rain was falling harder now, drumming against the roof like a funeral march. I sat in my armchair in the living room, a bottle of scotch on the table, 2 glasses. I had turned off most of the lights, leaving only a single lamp burning in the corner. I had made the call. I told Frank that I had made a deal, that I was out for 24 hours, and that I had found another box in the basement that Elena must have missed. I told him it was full of gold coins. I heard his car pull up. It wasn't a tactical approach this time. It was the confident arrival of a predator coming to scavenge a carcass. Frank let himself in. He had a key. I had given it to him 10 years ago for emergencies. "Matt?" he called out. His voice was thick with fake concern. "Buddy, are you okay?" "I came as soon as you called. I didn't stand up. I just swirled the amber liquid in my glass." "I'm in here, Frank." He walked into the living room, shaking the rain off his coat. He looked older than I remembered, his face puffy, his eyes darting around the room. He spotted the bottle and the glasses. "Jesus, Matt," he said, exhaling sharply. "You look like hell." I heard about the arrest. I couldn't believe it. I was just about to call the union rep for you. "Sit down, Frank," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite me. "Have a drink." He sat down, his eyes lingering on the shadows in the corners of the room. "So, you said you found more?" he asked, lowering his voice. "Gold?" I took a slow sip of scotch. "Yeah, in the crawl space. Elena didn't know about that spot. But you did. Remember when we fixed the plumbing down there in '98? Frank chuckled nervously. "Yeah, I remember. So, where is it? We need to move it, Matt. If the feds come back—" "Why did you do it, Frank?" I interrupted him. He froze. The glass was halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I know you planted the artifacts. I know you turned my daughter against me. I know about the gambling debts." Frank's face changed instantly. The concern vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. He set the glass down slowly. "You're tired, Matt. You're talking crazy. The stress has gotten to you." "I found her journal, Frank." I lied. "She wrote it all down. She detailed the meetings, the payments, the promise you made to help her get my pension." Frank was silent for a long moment. He reached into his jacket pocket. I tensed, wondering if he had a gun. But he pulled out a pack of cigarettes. He lit one, the flame illuminating the cruel lines of his face. "She was always a weak link," he said casually, exhaling a plume of smoke. "I told her not to write anything down. Stupid girl." My knuckles turned white, gripping the armrest. "She's my daughter, Frank. You used her to destroy my life." "Your life was already over, Matt," he snapped, his voice rising. "Look at you. You're living in a museum of your own righteousness. You sit here in this crumbling house, polishing your halo, while the rest of us are drowning. You could have made millions in your career. We could have run the border together. But no, you had to be the wall. You had to be perfect." He leaned forward, smoke curling around his face. "I did you a favor. You were going to lose the house anyway. At least this way, Elena gets paid, and I get the heat off my back. The Bureau needed a win. I gave them a big one. The legendary Matthew Charlton, corrupt all along. It's a great story." "So you admit it," I said softly. "You framed me. You supplied the artifacts." Frank laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Of course I did. And who are they going to believe? A senile old man who raised a criminal daughter, or a decorated task force leader? You have no proof, Matt. That journal is inadmissible. It's the ramblings of a crazy woman." I looked at the blinking red light on the smoke detector above his head. It wasn't a smoke detector. "Actually, Frank," I said, leaning back, "I have plenty of proof." Frank followed my gaze. He saw the device. He looked back at me, his eyes widening in realization. "I'm not wearing a wire this time, Frank," I said. "The whole house is wired. The front door kicked in, the back door shattered, windows smashed inward. Federal agents! Freeze!" The room filled with armored men. Laser sights danced across Frank's chest. He didn't reach for his gun. He just slumped in the chair, the cigarette falling from his fingers onto my carpet. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the friend I used to know, the man who had stood by me at the altar. "You son of a bitch," he whispered. I stood up, walking past him as the agents moved in to cuff him. "You broke the code, Frank," I said. "You forgot that walls don't move." The legal aftermath was swift and brutal. With Frank's confession caught on tape and Elena's testimony, which she gladly gave in exchange for a plea deal, the dominoes fell. It turned out Frank wasn't just gambling. He was part of a massive distribution network. His arrest led to the indictment of 12 other officers and 3 cartel liaisons. It was the biggest bust in the department's history, and it all started because a greedy girl wanted a new car. Elena was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She cried when the judge read the verdict. She looked at me in the gallery mouthing the word Dad, but I didn't wave, I didn't smile, I just watched. She had made her choice. She had chosen money over blood, and now she had neither. Frank got 25 years. He won't survive them. He knows too much, and prison is a dangerous place for a dirty cop. As for me, I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. Too many ghosts. Too many memories of a little girl who didn't exist anymore, and a friend who never did. I used the money from the sale to pay off the last of the debts. I bought a small cabin up north near the Canadian border, miles away from the nearest town. It's quiet there. I spend my days fishing, chopping wood, and reading. People call me a hero. The department sent me a commendation letter, thanking me for my unwavering service and integrity. They even offered to reinstate my pension to its full amount as an apology for the ordeal. I took the money. I donate most of it to a charity that helps families of officers killed in the line of duty. I sit on my porch sometimes, watching the sun set over the pines, and I think about the question I asked you at the beginning. If your child committed a crime to frame you, would you cover for them? I didn't cover for her. I let the law take its course. I did the right thing. I kept my integrity. I am still the wall. But let me tell you something about walls. They are strong. They are unmovable. They protect everything behind them. But a wall is also a very lonely thing to be. I have my honor. I have my freedom. But I have no one to share it with. So, was it worth it? I look at the empty chair next to me on the porch, and I listen to the silence of the woods, and I honestly don't know the answer. Thanks for listening. This story is a reminder that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones holding the knife. Stay vigilant, stay honest, and never, ever assume you know someone fully. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of betrayal and justice. And don't forget to check the pinned comment for a poll. Do you think I should visit Elena in prison, or should I leave her to her fate? I'll be reading your replies. Until next time.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.